Teachers, what weird or disturbing conversations have you overheard in a class that you were teaching? Story 1. We had a woman from the health department come into the biology classes every year to help us teach anatomy classes. It was sort of a collaborative community outreach thing. It was nice because the kids could have a change of pace and learn from someone different for a while, and the instructor would have more latitude to deal with any problems that might crop up while teaching the anatomy to 15-year-olds. There was one flaw in the plan, though. The teacher happened to be an extremely attractive young woman. She was in her early 20s and kind of had a supermodel thing going on. So the pastime of every class was for the young men to try to get her to say something dirty by asking innocent-seeming questions. Most of the time we let this slide. Hey, they were asking questions, right? That's a good thing, and maybe someone didn't know the answer. So one day, this kid who has never asked a question in his life points his finger at a sentence in the workbook, gets the most hilarious, theatrical, official look of confusion look on his face, and raises his hand. Yes, Terrence? Ms. Cruz, what is intentional incorrect pronunciation anal? Here it says oral, vaginal, or anal sex. What's that? Cue poop eating grin. I've never seen her get flustered before. Don't know why this one got to her. I imagine she'd been asked this question 1,000 times. She started stammering, though, and so I stepped in this kid's line of sight between him and her and exclaimed in my most loud and helpful manly voice, "I'll take this, Ms. Cruz. You see, Terrence, anal is when..." He starts waving his hands. He doesn't want to hear another dude explain to him what anal is. You know what, Mr. Deragius? That's all right. But Terrence, you asked a question. You must be curious. I need to give you this information. If you asked a question like that and then didn't want to hear the question, I might start to think that you were deliberately trying to interrupt my class. We need to talk about anal, Terrence. Long silence. Heavy sigh. Hand on shin. Terrence is not happy, but Terrence will listen. So, as I was saying, anal is when you bone involving the anus. If you guys remember the chapter on digestion, the anus is the exit of the digestive system. The colloquial term you would all use is butthole. The way this most typically works is a man takes his wiener and places it in the anus of another man. A few homophobic groans at this point, or a woman. You just have to be careful with anal and be sure to use a condom, because if you don't, you can get tearing in the tissue around your anus. This can lead to an increased chance of contracting an STD, and as you might imagine, other sorts of nasty infection. The reaction of the class to my mention of anal tearing was particularly animated. I think a couple of kids grabbed their butts. As I'm finishing up my explanation, I walk past the front row. A young lady is sitting there, and she mutters to herself, "I think I'm the only one who caught it amidst the commotion." Well, I'm never doing that again. Story 2. I was doing a teaching experience type thing at a local primary school. Used to want to be a teacher. I was in a grade 2 class, so this is all the 6-year-olds and such. I was helping this little girl with no friends. While helping, I wondered why she had no friends because she was really nice. Anyway, while waiting for her to complete this bit of artwork, I turned around to hearing a bunch of the other kids engaged in some serious discussion. Without trying to be obvious about it, I decided to try and hear what they were talking about to try and find out why this girl I was with is so different to everyone else, or why no one else wanted to be friends with her. These 6-year-olds I was eavesdropping on, 4 of them to be precise, were talking about, and in depth, different positions and Kama Sutra stuff. I was shocked at first, so I decided to ask them what they were talking about. As it turns out, most of them learned this from listening to their parents talk about it. So, just a small tip, watch out what you're saying around your kids. Their minds are like sponges. Whatever you say, they will probably repeat, and to a bunch of other kids too. Shocked at the conversation, I just turned around to tell the actual teacher and girl I was with, that's why I don't want to be friends with them. I couldn't help but laugh. Story 3. Not a teacher, but I once walked past a classroom with the door open, and I caught the final snippets of this notoriously poopy teacher going off at a kid. "Don't you ever bring a knife into my classroom ever again." So I'm thinking something crazy must be going down. And being my curious self, I walk into the classroom and say, "Whoa, what's going on, sir?" We called our teachers sir. And in this icy Professor Snape voice, he says, "This student has brought a concealed weapon into my classroom. This is most serious indeed." I turn to the kid and ask him if I can see the knife. He gets out this tiny craft knife and starts crying. I told him it was for art class. We were cutting balsa wood next period. Anyway, at that point I started laughing and told Sir to lighten up. He was later fired for professional misconduct, unrelated incident, but that guy was the biggest mess-up I've ever met. Forget where I was going with this, other than I was initially disturbed, and then confused, and then in hysterics. Story 4. I hear crazy things, some happy and some sad. I was in a classroom during a show and tell, but mostly tell time, in which a student explained to the class that she doesn't like it when Daddy makes her touch him. Needless to say, this was reported, and she is now in a different home. And sometimes you overhear the best things. One of my students was getting picked up early. I overheard him say, "But Mom, I don't want to miss my teacher's class." And one more. I teach at multiple schools. 2 middle school students were separated when they left elementary school. They're both mentally impaired and have a bajillion medical conditions. But these 2 girls write each other letters talking about loving one another and how much they miss each other. They tell anybody who will listen about their girlfriend. They each keep photos of them together in their work areas and lockers. Passing their correspondence back and forth has pretty much made my year. Story 5. I've worked as a substitute teacher off and on for years. When you're a substitute, kids often don't care what they say in front of you because you're gone the next day. I've heard middle school-aged girls discussing proper bejesus techniques. I've heard a group of elementary-aged students discussing the unalive body they found in the woods. I've heard several times, at all different ages, groups of kids discussing drug deals and where to get the best stuff. But by far the most messed up thing I've been involved in was another group of middle school-aged girls discussing me and what I would be like in the bedroom. I'm male and marginally attractive. Basically, they were sizing me up and talking about all sorts of rather graphic things towards the end of the day. When I asked them why on earth they would be talking about this sort of stuff at their age, they gave me a blank stare and just laughed. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 6. I had a physics teacher who would habitually get off topic really easily. He taught us about the Doppler effect one day. It progressed like this. Explains what the Doppler effect is. He gives us the example of a car driving by quickly, the noise dropping in pitch as it passes. Tells us his history of speeding tickets, often for 20 over. One time I made it all the way through Kentucky in like an hour and a half. It was the narrower section, like 200 miles. We were doing like 120 the whole time. Never got caught. I was on propane at the time, but no way I'd do something that stupid sober. Propane screws you up though. I don't recommend it. Know what's awesome though? Opium. In like 5-10 minutes, it progressed from explaining the Doppler effect to telling us how opium is awesome. Paraphrased because it was a while ago and I don't remember specifics, but the math checks out on his Kentucky trip. Community college is awesome. Story 7. Intermediate teacher here. Most disturbing, a student telling a classmate he was going to stab him in the neck with a fork while he was sleeping and then set his house on fire. Weirdest, we were talking about proportions and had been using abbreviations for units. M, cm, yd, ft, etc. I put up an example that was something to the effect of, if a grocery store sells 5 muffins for $2, how much is each muffin? The following conversation took place in the front row. Student 1. How do you abbreviate muffin? Student 2. I don't know. Muff? I'm not sure how I managed not to crack up. The other stuff I hear are mostly about drugs, and usually about parents using them, although I had a girl wear a pot leaf necklace one day, or it's some new thing that they've just discovered and think that either A, they're being sneaky, or B, I don't know what it means. I'm a relatively new teacher though, so I'm sure there will be a lot more to come. Story 8. I told this one on the internet a couple of days ago. I have a few students in my class who know each other and rip on each other. One student's parents are from Africa. He was milling around in class while they should have been working. He walked to the trash can, then just started pressing the drinking water button. I like to be sarcastic, and I said, "Student's name, quit wasting water. Some people in this world don't have the luxury to waste it." To this, a student piped up and said, "Yeah, I'm going to have to tell your relatives in Africa what you're doing." That one is in my top 5 for my career. P.S. The kid still hasn't learned. He still simulates bejesuses, and I had to kick him out when he was talking about corn sites. I've also had kids talk about felonies and the like. I also get a lot of weird questions. Who invented the word slow? Did we have hurricanes back then? Does the extra credit have to be right to receive credit? Story 9. This just happened to me the other day. I was substituting at a school I work part-time at. It's a Catholic all-girls school, which may be important. After I had told the students what they were to work on, I said they could chat a little so long as they were working. Well, about halfway through the period, I start hearing this girl talk louder and louder. It turns out she was venting her frustrations with her boyfriend. It was something along the lines of, "He can only last 5 minutes. It's so frustrating. I always yell at him and tell him to go longer, but he's like, 'Oh, I can't, baby, it's hard.' And I'm like, 'BS. Seriously, I know you can. Hold it. Come on, I can do this better myself.'" I was in shock. I glanced over to where they were talking, and I think they saw that I could hear what they were talking about. So naturally, I quickly looked away and continued to browse the internet. Story 10. I heard a 14-year-old girl saying, "Screw that, I wasn't about to show up to that poop sober." She was a classy girl, having spent all summer on house arrest, about 90 pounds, always picking fights. I had one girl call me over because her book was vandalized with the word jazz. From that day on, whenever the class got loud, she'd say, "Jazz," and hoped I couldn't tell it was her. I had to fight not to laugh. She and I are friends now. During a standardized test where a group of girls were seated near each other in small round tables, the girls kept calling me over to ask questions. I found out later that whichever girls I wasn't facing were making grabbing motions towards my butt. Story 11. I'm currently working on a degree in math education, and last summer I had a literacy class at middle school. I had a group of 6th graders, all girls, and we were reading a section of Hatchet. They each had to come up with a question and then answer it as a group. One girl asked how the others would react in Brian's situation. Stranded in the wild without food or water, they came up with a plan that involved building a makeshift bow and arrow and a knife, hunting down birds and small animals, preparing them, finding clean water, and starting a fire to stay warm. I was pretty impressed, until the conversation devolved into a 15-minute discussion on how Canadians say moose. Story 12. Oh, I've been doing this for 15 years, so I have a few, yeah. Too bad you didn't ask for things we've witnessed, winky face. This one sort of counts, I guess. We were on a field trip to SeaWorld in San Diego, which means a whale's vagina. I teach less than an hour inland. This kid had dreads and moved to our school from Compton, or somewhere, mid-year. I treated him well, showed him how smart he was, and tried my best. So we are on the bus, and the kid's obviously nodding off. Poor kid can barely keep his eyes open. And I know his parents don't make him go to bed. He looks back at me and says, "Mr. So-and-so, please don't let me fall asleep. I've never seen the ocean." Story 13. Last year, one of the guys at my school was in a life skills class, the kind for reluctant learners. He got angry at a girl who had rejected his affections and started yelling at her. When the teacher told him to sit down, he grabbed a roll of paper towels from the back of the room, lit it on fire, and threw it at the front of the classroom, saying, "This is what I think of your class." While the teacher was distracted, he pulled a knife on the girl. Probably could have done serious damage. But one of the kids, who was a massive stoner and who I had always laughed at for never amounting to anything, tackled him and saved the girl's life. Story 14. I teach 7th grade language arts, and I had one particularly bright class in which I thought it was appropriate to teach them the game because I knew they could keep up. One day this conversation unfolded. Student: I hate writing. I want to go home and play video games. Me: oh, what kind of games do you like? Student: oh man, too many to name. Me: like the one you just lost? Class loses their crap. The next day I realized I had created a monster. Same student: teacher, can't we play a game or something? Me: sure, what game? Same student: the one you just lost. Class in total uproar. Story 15. A little girl asked me if I had cat eyes. I told her I did because my dad was a cat. She believed me. Same girl asked me if I had ever seen a movie for adults only. Not liking where this was going at all, I replied no, and suggested we get back to reading. She then proceeded to tell me how she found one in the back of her mom's closet and then acted out a porno scene. Was smoking on the back porch with my roommate, and out of nowhere, the same girl pokes her head up over the walls and yells, "Well, hey there, mister." I moved out of that place real quick. Story 16. I'm an aide and spend most of the day grading papers and helping 2nd grade kids. I help in an accelerated class, so the students' writing is pretty advanced for their age. I was reading an essay, and even though this isn't exactly weird or disturbing, I thought it was funny that a student wrote, "I went camping with Emily's family." I think my daddy and her mommy like each other. Pretty sure Emily's mom is married because she came in one time and was wearing a wedding ring. Story 17. My mom is a teacher. She once told me a story about a second grader she had. She worked special education in a rather inner-city establishment where a daily snack was provided for the students. One day she asked a behaviorally challenged little boy why he was not eating his broccoli for snack time. He said, "Miss, I'd eat this broccoli, except it tastes like butt." Story 18. Conversation between two 10-year-old males in my class. "I'm going to punch you." "Yeah, well, I'm going to sock you." "Yeah, well, I'm going to beat you up." "Yeah, well, I'm going to send a letter to your parents and pretend it's from a doctor, and I'm going to tell them you have cancer." Wow. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.